Happy Wednesday, everyone.
Okay, cool. Welcome everybody. Today we will look into monorepos, apps, and component libraries with Nx. Let me walk you through the agenda for today. We will start with why monorepos matter and importantly, why having a well-structured one makes all the difference. Then we will dive into Nx, the engine behind our monorepo setup, and see how it helps streamline development. And then we will look into Nx Cloud and Atomizer, which bring serious speeds to the pipeline. I will also look at how CI gets smarter with features like code owners, helping teams collaborate more effectively. And finally, we will wrap it up with a live demo of our app, the Place My Order app, to see how everything we talked about. This is me, Elias. I'm an Nx expert and a front-end consultant at Bitovi. We collaborate with companies to create amazing web apps. At B2V, we specialize in consulting, corporate trainings, and building open source toolings. And this is Jordan, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Ilias. I'm Jordan Powell. This is always my least favorite part of the talk, where I have to talk about myself. But it's always helpful to know who is the stranger that you're listening to. But yeah, I'm Jordan Powell. I'm a developer productivity engineer at Nx, and I'm also the director of our partners program, and that's sort of why we're meeting today, as Bitovi is one of our certified partners at Nx, and they are kind of like a trusted implementation experts when it comes to helping people that are looking to either adopt NX or solve any other type of engineering problems. They're one of the people that we certainly point people to, and so that's why we thought they'd be great to kind of do a webinar today to kind of share some of the things we've been doing as part of that collaboration. But yeah, super excited to be on the stream today, be part of this webinar, and obviously you can reach out to me via email there, and or on socials, LinkedIn, so forth. So yeah, appreciate you all joining.
Thanks, Jordan. Okay, so let's start off by why monorepos. So let's take a look at the diagram we have here. It highlights the key difference between monorepos and polyrepos. At the top, we have a monorepo setup, the everything apps, libraries, everything lives under a single organizational repo. This allows all teams to work from one source of truth, whether you're working uh, on app one or app two, you're consuming the same shared library. For example, here, library one, or library two, or library three, without the need for external publishing or versioning. This sometimes leads to faster collaboration. Teams can move quicker because there's clear ownership, shared conventions, and a common structure that re uh, there's a common structure that reduces frictions between domains. It also means simplified versioning. There is no risk of package drift. You upgrade, for example, Angular material or any internal dependency once, and the entire workspace benefits from the upgrade. No need to manage versions across multiple repos. Now, if we look at the polar repo model below, every app and library lives in its own repo. That means more overhead synchronizing versions between applications and libraries, and also handling package publishing. We all have been that dog, I think, calmly sipping our coffee while everything burns uh, inside, saying just keep copy pasting, it will be fine. A monorepo without structure feels exactly like the picture we saw here. Duplication, tangled dependencies, no clear ownership, and a huge pipeline time. But it doesn't have to be like it. If we go to the next slide. Okay, so this is where NX steps in with powerful schematics and generators. You can enforce consistency and scale your architecture. Thanks again to the dependency graph awareness, Nx knows exactly how everything is connected, which lets you avoid unintentional packages and makes your workspace more transparent. And it gets better with the affected commands, so you're not rebuilding or testing the entire board every time someone touches a button. All of this comes with the first class support of Angular, React, Next.js, and more, so you get the tooling benefit without sacrificing your stack of choice. Now, while Nx shines in a monorepo setup, it's also polyrepo friendly, and that's something a lot of teams miss. You don't have to go all in from day one. You can incrementally adopt it in existing repos, bring in powerful tooling and workflows without having to restructure everything overnight. It also lets you share configuration and enforce conformance across multiple repos, which is perfect for large organizations or teams that aren't ready or able to merge everything just yet. And when the time is right, with the migration command, Nx gives you a smooth migration path to the full monorepo setup. We've seen how Nx brings structure and scalability, whether you're a monorepo or a polyrepo setup. Let's talk about taking things to the next level with Nx Cloud. And for this part, I will hand it over to Jordan.
Perfect. So yeah, Nx Cloud is going to be sort of like everything that Ilyas was referring to previously is all Nx open source. Open source, you can use it to fork it, use it. It's an amazing, powerful tool, just as is. But one of the things that kind of one of the trade-offs when you sort of adopt a monorepo is eventually it can have some sort of performance degradation and challenges as you begin to scale. And so that's where Nx Cloud really comes to the rescue in this. And I wanted to briefly just highlight like three main features, one being the Atomizer, which we'll demo here, the second being DTE, and the third being flaky task retries. And let's specifically highlight, focus in on the Atomizer. And so with the Atomizer, basically what it will do is can run a task. Primarily think of it for end-to-end tasks. So like for your, say, Cypress test, Playwright test, things like that are doing end-to-end, where they typically take a long time to run, you can basically essentially shard or split up those tests into separate tasks. And Nx will basically do this for you by default. So in the example above, we run the Nx affected command. We're running the target end-to-end -ci, and then basically what that will do is look for all the test files for this given app and separate them into separate tasks. So in this example, we have, say, an app one project that has an end-to-end target that has 3 tests, file 1, file 2, and file 3. It would then separate those into 3 separate tasks. And what this looks like in practice is that like they would run independently. So in the example here is we have three of those tests pass, or we had 3 separate tests, but one of them failed. And so what we want to be able to do is in a traditional setup, you would have to re-kick off your entire pipeline, and it would then have to rerun your entire end-to-end suite again. But what we can do now, basically, if we were to rerun this, because file 1 and file 2, those 2 tasks passed in the previous run, we don't need to rerun them again. We can just read those from the Nx remote cache. And then if we were to then try to run file 3, it will then just run file 3 and give us a passing test. So this is a way where you can, and this is a pretty trivial example, but as you can imagine, you have pretty large test suite. Something like this is certainly pretty, can have a significant performance lift. And this is just kind of out of the box with Nx and Nx Cloud. And the second point we wanted to talk about is distributed task execution. And it's a fancy word and it's hard to say. So I always just refer to it as DTE. But essentially, we could kind of take a similar look at this. And so say we were to in CI run, we wanted to essentially build our app. We wanted to run tests, lint, and end-to-end, all those types of targets across our app to make sure everything that has been affected on a given and like a given set of changes and a PR or something like that, that we're running all of those things. And so if we were to run this, we're essentially separating these into like 4 separate commands: nx affected build, nx affected test, lint, and edeci. So if we were to take this concept where we were to think about this in terms of DTE, what this means is that we would take basically those 4 commands and essentially pass it into NX Cloud. And then basically what NX Cloud will do is look at the graph and essentially pass those to a given set of agents. And those agents, in this case, this example, we'll use 4 agents. And agents can be your own machines that you're using inside of your own infrastructure, maybe GitHub Actions, or maybe it's however you have your own machines in your own CI, you can configure it to use that. Or NX has our own agents that are sort of the most finely tuned, really for these sort of tasks. And then basically what NX Cloud will do with DTE is basically look at the graph, what was changed and what needs to run, and then sort of dynamically pass the next task into an available agent. And what this allows you to do is basically dynamically on every set of PR, basically run whatever change is necessary in the most efficient way possible, in a very flexible way. So it's just, we see pretty significant speed improvements when it comes to when you mix DT with our NX Cloud and NX caching. And then sort of kind of like an additional kind of feature to that is flaky retries. So oftentimes as we're thinking about end-to-end tests, we realize that a lot of these tests typically can become flaky, right? And if we look at that same example from earlier where we had 3 separate tests, let's just say file 1 passed, file 2 were to pass, but file number 3 would maybe be flaky. So we could see here that the file number 3 was flaky. And so if we were to take this concept and then now think of it and we were to run in like a DT setting, we can kind of see the same thing in action where we have the first test that were to run on agent number 1, it passed, and then the second would run on agent number 2. And then let's just say in the third example, that test that failed, we would say this failed. But instead of failing our entire CI run, NX Cloud can basically determine that this is a flaky task. And instead of failing your CI run, what it can do is pass this to another one of your agents and rerun again. So in this case, we can pass this from agent number 3 to agent number 2, and it will rerun. And now that file passed. So now we don't have to rerun, spin up new agents, a new CI run, reinstall npm, blah, blah, blah. We get a much more accurate representation of that CIP run. We get to see this test pass and so on and so forth. So this is just a few examples of how we can leverage NX Cloud to really speed up our workflows. And then finally, one of the things we want to talk about is code owners. And one of the other main parts besides sort of scalability and the challenges around that is how can teams work together nicely, right? Because we can all play in the same sandbox, but all the kids have to get along and have to share their toys, right? And so in order to do so, we want to be able to allow people to have freedom, but also have some level of control and constraints. And so NX has this concept of conformance, which I'll actually demo here in a second. But basically what it does is it can use something like GitHub code owners file, but it can basically take that concept and read from the NX graph to basically dynamically generate code owners and things like that. So in an example, we could take a given set of changes. NX will basically run to check what changed on a given PR. And that PR bot inside of GitHub will basically say, hey, this team was affected by this change, and they're required to review this PR before it can be merged. So this is a great way. So you can encourage cross-team collaboration, but the team that is ultimately affected or owns the code that is changed is still required to actually put their stamp of approval on it before it gets merged. This is a great way to and again, encourage collaboration and sort of working across domains, but also allowing everyone to still feel like they have ownership in their code. As well, on top of this, we also get next bullet point is if there are certain, you can also set up rules. So like, for example, maybe you could set up a rule, and I'll show this, that says the front end can never import from something owned by the back end. Maybe you want them importing through some shared library that both of them can do. So what you could do is, if you try to create a PR where the front end tries to import something from the back end, it would just fail the PR directly, and you wouldn't even be allowed to merge this in. So this is another example of how you can use these conformance rules to sort of create some level of conformance across your org, so that your code base, even though it maybe include all your teams, it doesn't have to become this like painful experience. The other thing is, so this concept of code owners is something that you can do today, and it's built into GitHub. But there's one challenge that it has outside of this concept with Nx, is that it's hard to make sure that all of your projects are up to date and actually have an owner, where Nx has this built-in code owners rule that basically says that every project in your workspace, that it is required to have someone own it, right? So you don't just have orphans or projects that are laying around that don't have an owner to them, and that if you try to create a new project without an owner, it would then fail CI as well. And then finally, this ultimately just cuts review noise, speeds up approval and just reviews in general, and makes it so you're not asking people to review code that you can easily stop and require your own change before it actually pings that person for approval, that sort of thing. So again, just improves the quality of code and just creates a general set of guidelines and just overall collaboration across your organization. All right. I think it's time for a demo. Ilias, enough of me talking.
Thank you. Well, I will always want you to talk. If you could share my screen. Let me try to do that. Is it shared to everybody? Okay, I think it is. Okay, cool. So for the demo, we're using the Place My Order app. It's an application we've been using throughout our trainings in the Bitovi Academy. The idea is straightforward. You can picture a restaurant management solution where you can place orders and update their status. In practice, that means there will be separate front-end apps, one for the sysadmin, for example, who onboards new restaurants, one for the restaurant manager, and the third for customers to place their orders, and finally a backend API. So in the demo, we'll see how all four live happily inside a single Nx monorepo. So I have the apps running here. So I have the sysadmin app, restaurant app, and Place My Order app. So I can, for example, log in as a sysadmin, add a restaurant to my solution. Let's name it whatever, Tagine restaurant. If you never tried tagines before, so this is your call to do so. If I could type correctly, restaurant, and then address, gonna put whatever item, basically tagine, and price. Let's do something. Just save it. Oh, I need to add the slug. Doesn't matter. And now if I go to notice how, if I go to the restaurant admin app, notice how the UI has changed between the two apps. So we're still using the same dashboard with different styles. So we will see how you can set up something similar to this in a monorepo space. And then if I go to the Place My Order app, it's also using the same component libraries. And then you could, for example, browse for restaurants, look for the tagine one, and make your order. Let's try to do that. Just going to do whatever here, place the order. Just need to remember the name. the email and the name. And then if I search, I get to see the order. So now let's look into the code part of this. So before we dive in into the code, notice how I've been serving the three apps all at the same time. The way we can do that, you can do it with one single command, thanks to the Nx new infinite task feature. So instead of juggling between terminals, you could use one command to run them all. This is how it would work. It would, first of all, serve, let me go to it. It would build your API and then serve the place my order app, serve the admin app and the restaurant app, and serve also the API. The way you can set this up, we can look into it really quickly. So if you go to, you need to go to your apps, right? And so for us, the starting command would be the place my order app. So if we go to the place my order app project.json, this should be serve all task configuration. This is where you specify the executor. This is basically telling Nx that to use this executor to serve your app, and then options if you have any. In our case, we want to serve the app in this port. And then this is the new infinite task feature when you tell Nx that this task is going to be infinite and it depends on this project. And you also get the Intel Sense and type safety here. It's not just a JSON, so you could get your target and the project you want to run. And you do the same for the other apps. Okay, now moving on to the, would like to run the graph. So now that everything is running, let's talk about the folder structure. And I think nothing explains it best more than the Nx graph. So if you type in npx Nx graph, it should open you this graph with you. For example, you can show all projects. This way you have, you see all the libraries and projects you have in your repo. In our case, let's start, for example, with the place my order app. Let's focus on it. So we see that the place my order app imports statically, not dynamically from these other libraries, which means that we're not using the, so if we go to this file, if we go to the PMO routes, so here we're dynamically importing or lazy loading the component. This also gets picked up by Nx, and it knows that this library is statically used. And for the other apps that are hardly imported, like the common modules, they are referenced by another arrow. So you see your libraries with the help with Nx graph. So here the Nx builds this map by analyzing the imports, as I mentioned, of your libraries. So another thing, because the graph generation is fully pluggable, you can extend it for edge cases or even other languages if you need to. So the mechanism that Nx uses behind the hood for under the hood for determining the nodes and the relationship between libraries, it's also extendable, and you can even use it in your in other languages on an edge case you have. Yeah, that's about it for the graph, I think. Now I think we could look into the folder structure a little bit. At least in Angular, the way you could structure your apps is to have a host app where all the built-in and everything that needs to be configured globally, like in Nginx, the built-in mechanism and all of that, everything happens here. And then all your, we call this a shell or host app. And then all your features are inside the libs, which going to be libraries features. So each feature you try to use a domain-driven approach for this. So you try to see all the features that your app might use and create libraries for them. And then your host app would use those features inside your app. So this way you're giving Nx the ability to take your app and not have everything in one app, but use features for each section of your domain. So the granular you go, the better will be for Nx to to be optimized with for build or test or whatever. As you can see here, for example, these feature libraries, they have their own ESLint config. They extend the base TypeScript config. So you could, for example, make a change in this library, make, for example, TypeScript change, and it will be local only to this library. You could also make an ESLint change, a gist change, depends on your use case. Now let's take a scenario where we make a change in our component library. The way it's structured here is we have like a common folder, and inside of it we have a UI. So inside the UI we have the dashboard layout, the one we showed earlier, which going to be used between both application, the sysadmin one and the other one. So you could easily, for example, go here. If you use the Nx console, click on focus on this project for the Nx graph, and it will tell you whoever uses this library. In this case, it's the restaurant admin and the sysadmin, and all of them use the common modules. So you know if you make any change here, it would trigger, for example, test also in the restaurants admin and the sysadmin. Yeah, so if we go, for example, here and let's try to add like a footer to the dashboard layout, the way we can do that, let's just add like a mat card or something. The continued task will trigger whatever, for example, in this case, I changed the dashboard layout. So the host app will change. In this case, it's going to be sysadmin one and the restaurants admin one. So if we go back to the demo, we should get our footer here, and it's shared between both of them. So no need to publish anything to a registry and npm install it in the other applications. Everything lives in the same repo. And yeah, that's all I got for the demo.
Yeah, sounds great. Let me now kind of demo a little bit of what I was talking about with the atomizer and that sort of thing. So, and the conformance rules. So, say I wanted to go in and let's just okay, yeah. So now we have my screen here. Let's say I wanted to add a demo spec to this, and basically I want to do something that would make this fail. So I would expect 2, and what I just created a simple test util that's returning 3. Obviously, we would never expect 2 to equal 3, so this would fail. And what would happen is if we were to run this, ultimately, we would see that this RCI would run and that this would fail. By default, though, what I wanted to highlight is if we were to look at the Nx graph, which Elias was just kind of describing, but if we were to go to our task graph and we were to open up our ETE CI targets and we were to go to this sysadmin ETE app, which is where we added this new demo spec TS, you see that it automatically picked this file up, as well as it's picking up our other specs that were here. So this is sort of how the Atomizer is basically taking our spec files and automatically, dynamically generating the task for them. But if we were to go ahead and sort of zoom into this and we look at the inputs of this, we see that it has the inputs are included some of the global things like changes to our CI, NXJSON, and then it's saying that any changes to itself would basically invalidate the cache, but also like login and the restaurant spec, which is sort of the default behavior with NX Atomizer today with like our built-in plugins. But I think that this can be improved on, and what I wanted to kind of show is how you can create your own plugins to create maybe more optimized sort of behavior or tailored experiences to your organization. And so what I would really expect is that really demo spec should have nothing to do with these other tests. And what I would really want is for a change to any of these to not really like invalidate the results of this test. And so what I want to do is show you. I actually wrote created a plugin called Custom Atomizer that basically extends on top of the existing plugin. But what it does is it will actually, instead of depending upon the default inputs for all end-to-end sharded tests, it will actually just pull in the config for that. So in this case, the playwright config. It will also import itself, so this specific test and any of its relative import. So in this case, it's relatively importing test util from inside of this own library. So if we change this, we would also expect this test to fail. So if I were to run this in CI, you would then see, here's a quick example of this PR. If we were to run this, we would then see that we could run this, and this test is failing because we expect it to fail. 2 should never equal 3. And we are able to pull in the actual caching results for these other 2 because those tests did not actually pass. But that is after I basically, so that PR run I was just referencing is using this new plugin. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to use the built-in Nx plugin. I'm going to actually reference my new plugin that I built, and you can easily just do this by just referencing this file directly. In my case, I added a specific flag that turns on this sort of test isolation feature, meaning that we only want this to happen is if we're using like test isolation practices. So in this case, I turn this on as true. And now if I were to rerun this graph, we should see this change. So if I were to go to tasks, same sort of thing. We want to go to our eteci, show all the tasks for it, go back to our ete for sysadmin, and we now see this demo spec. We saw the same thing, but if I were to zoom into these inputs, I now have a different behavior where the input is now the demo spec, so the test itself, the playwright config, which if we make changes to that config, we want to invalidate the cache, and the relative import this test util that this test inputs. So now if we were to rerun this, login spec and restaurant spec they don't need to rerun. They can reread from the cache. And if we were to push this change in CI, basically the result would be this, where we're getting a cache hit for login and restaurant spec because those did not change. Whereas this demo spec, it reran because we actually changed this file. So this is a way you can easily create your own plugins, but also you can really create very efficient ways because to run your tests faster or make your CI more performant, things like this. And then one final thing I wanted to point out is let's look at this in terms of conformance. So I mentioned I just created a new plugin. So this plugin exists down here, and it is this tools custom atomizer. And inside this project, it doesn't have an owner. And let me explain this a bit. So basically, the way you define your owners in Nx is inside this Nx JSON. There is this owner's property, and it's basically saying that we have certain teams. So we have a front end team, and we have a back end team. We have a common team, which is both the front end team and the back end team. And then we can also just tag a specific user. Like this plugin that I created, it doesn't belong to a team. Maybe I'm the person that owns it because I just created it. So you can reference a specific GitHub username, or you can reference a specific team. And the way this connects with Nx is it looks for these tags inside of a project. So in this case, Nx is expecting that this new project would belong to an infra team. In this case, would just be me. So if I were to actually run, NX conformance check, this will actually fail. And this is because it's saying that this project currently has no owners defined via NX owners. And this is what I was mentioning, is that one of the challenges of code owners sort of as is that there's really no way to make sure you don't have orphan projects. Like as you add things that they have owners. So if I were to go back to this and be like, oh yeah, I need to add this. Let me add infra tag to this. And now if I were to rerun NX sync, which is how it's basically the script that runs that syncs everything together. And now we should see the difference here. Let me just pull it up here. You'll now see we have let's see. Now these are all up to date. I already had committed this. This is why. But now if we were to run conformance check here, we now see that we are no longer getting these violations. Then finally, I won't kind of demo this, but you should be able to sort of be able to paint the pictures of how this works. But essentially, we also have the ability to, not in here, but in our NX.json file. Oops, not this. And our NX.json file. On top of the actual code owners, we can also basically create boundaries in our project. So in this case, we want to say that if for some reason, basically we never want our front end, any project that has a tag of front end to depend on something from the back end, and vice versa. Back end should never import from the front end. If they need to have something that's shared between them, it should be a part of a common project. And so if we were to basically import something and we run this NX conformance check, it would actually yell at us and say, hey, you're importing something that from back end into front end, and you have a rule saying that this doesn't allow this. So again, this is just a few little things that you can add that to your workspace project that works with NX and NX Cloud that really create conformance, just cohesion across all of your projects, and ultimately creates a better sort of developer experience for your team, and also creates just good, healthy rules, so you're not degrading the quality of your code over time, which ultimately is the thing that we want to care about, because we want to ship good code. We don't want to have to be maintaining things that we could catch before it gets introduced. So that's the main thing there. So hopefully, I guess, do we have any questions? I think this is really the main end of what we had today. The other thing is, while we'll give people time to submit questions, is another thing we didn't really get into, but I think is kind of worth noting, and just sort of the time and space we're in today, is that I believe that, and not just myself, but what we believe at NX, is that the use case for NX and tools like NX are really increased, like their value when we think about it in terms of AI, because as we leverage AI more and more as part of our kind of developer lifecycle and how we're shipping code, the more context that we can give our LLMs, the better it's going to at helping us, right? And so because NX has this graph, it has sort of all this metadata and relationships of how all the parts interconnect, and just all the information about your entire workspace. So if you try to import something that is maybe the wrong name or something like that, and you say, why is this failing? Well, if you're trying to import something that's not part of this workspace, it's going to be much difficult in like a polyrepo structure for the LLM to be able to resolve what the problem is. But if you have your entire workspace context that it can feed into the LLM, it's much easier for it to be like, oh, you imported the wrong path. You should use this path instead, something like that. So I think that those are all really just sort of side notes. I know that this wasn't really an AI talk, but I think that as we begin to, it's sort of forefront of a lot of developers' minds. So I think that is important to kind of call out as we're kind of wrapping up, our discussion here. So, What do you think about that, Elias?
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think in general, the more context you give to the LLMs, the less hallucinations you would get. And having a, for example, Linux, it helps you stay consistent with your repo, and that alone is a great context for the LLMs, so they can learn more how you structure your code, how you go about it, and they could help you more in building features and all of that. So yeah, I think I do see good opportunities here for people to learn, and also for Nx to plug in with all the AI tools we have out there. So
For sure. And then I guess while we're just talking about this, we actually do have our own MCP server. So when you're trying to uh, maybe you're in a project and you are trying to do something like generate a new project, a new library, whatever it is. Like Nx can actually, when you try to enter prompt and cursor or whatever LLM you're using, it will then ask you like, hey, do you want to use the Nx MCP server to basically look into our docs, look into our APIs, and it will give you a more Nx sort of approved way of doing those things, which is pretty cool. As well as one of my favorite things is when you're developing the Nx console, like you're working in your editor, it will actually pop up a an alert saying, "Hey, your CI just failed. Click here," and it'll go right to it, which is really cool. Just like little things like that that you can kind of uh, tag into it. Let's see. Looks like we do have a question, Ilias. Do you want to read that
yep,
for us?
yeah, sure. I think Lucy is saying, what would you say are common gotchas, pitfalls when trying to improve efficiency with Linux? Yeah, I think I'm gonna talk a little bit from the Angular side at least. Know your needs more in the context of. I think if you know the project or at least what's coming up in the future, this would help a lot in a lot of decisions. For example, do you want to make the library is buildable or not? Do you want to use incremental build? How many people will be using the app? How many uh, team we have? Do we want to have? Are we planning to do micro front ends in the future? So answering these type of questions, I think, helps a lot in improving efficiency with Linux, because you will be able to take good decisions on your structure on the repo. And yeah, I don't know if you have any other ideas, Jordan.
Yeah, I would say I've a couple things that come to mind is obviously it depends like your specific use case, the problems you're trying to solve, the structure of your team, size of your team, the expertise of your teams, all those sort of play into it. But I would say you hinted kind of at a couple of them. I would say uh, typically incremental builds. Are kind of like a slippery slope. They
Yep.
sound great, but ultimately, um, the challenge with them is, especially well, primarily with Webpack, is they can actually, in a lot of cases, make your performance slower than just having one giant build. So I would say that's something to be aware of. Typically, you want to only reach for them if you really only want to add it to things that change very infrequently. And that don't have other things that it depends upon. And so I would say if you're not sure of that, then I would say just avoid using it until it becomes a problem. The other thing I would say is every graph is different. We work with customers with thousands of projects in their graph, and obviously the structure of that can get kind of a little crazy. It's imagine very mature code bases. They have good, bad. Everyone you talk to, they're always like, "Oh, we have code that ours is the worst," or "We have all this technical debt," stuff like that. So I would say, if you're as you're thinking, like NX is not going to be a magic pill that solves all your scaling problems or something like that. But if you lean into it, it definitely can really solve most of those problems. I would say, like for example, if you have one massive project, adding an NX is not going to really add that much value because it's still one massive monolith, right? And we think sometimes like monorepo and monolith are the same thing, but they're really two different things. So like I love that in the example app that we used here earlier, is that we broke out this singular sort of app into multiple kind of smaller domains and separate libraries. So that way we're not always if it's just one massive sort of node in our graph, then we're always affecting it in any given set of change. So there's not really a lot of optimizations you can use with NX. So
you should also, I think I would say, take your time to know which features will be in what library or something like that. I think you hinted at this at the end. So you don't want to have something big like a monolith with you will be hitting it every time you run a test, but you don't also want to have something very granular and very small that would cost you time. So it's you need to find the right balance to split your apps into the proper libraries, and it depends on it. It's a case by case, I think, scenario.
sure. It looks like we have another question. I'll read it to you, Elias. It says, suppose you don't have a monorepo yet. You're in a polyrepo structure. Would the host app be able to use features from another repo without too much hassle with NX? I guess I can answer this. I would say that originally the intention, the problems that NX was trying to solve is really meant for like the enterprise structure where a monorepo is sort of like the kind of the lesser of two evils when it comes to like the problems you're trying to solve. And it tried to basically take the benefits of a monorepo and reduce as much pain as possible. But we've over the last few years we've realized that there's a lot of people that will probably never adopt a monorepo structure, and they want to use some of the features. And so, one of the things that we've introduced is this feature called polygraph, which is ability for basically to take this graph-like concept inside of NX, where we have a graph of your project, but be able to kind of map it across repos across your organization. So maybe you have a workspace for your front end, and you have a separate workspace for your back end, and you want to be able to see a graph of all of them together. We have this ability with NX with polyrepo. So this is something that it's really pretty painless to implement. There are some feature gaps because there's some challenges with this sort of structure, but I would say in general it's pretty easy to implement this. And you also mentioned, and I'll let you kind of elaborate on it, but sort of our import generator alias, because I think that is something you talked about earlier that would certainly address this a little bit as well. Any existing project, so say you're in a polyrepo structure and you want to add NX to it, all you have to do is inside that project type npx nx and import or init, and basically it will initialize NX inside of the existing repo. Or if you're in, say, one polyrepo structure and you want to import another polyrepo project into that one, you can run an npx nx import, and then you type in the path of the project that you want to import, and it will then do the migration to bring it over, sort of import everything. You actually preserve Git history and everything. So it's pretty cool way to we try to make the process of adopting sort of NX as a whole as painless as possible. So hopefully that answers your question. Looks like we are at time though, Elias. So Lucy was asking these questions, or asking about how can we adopt NX. Like those are things that Bitovi, they're really skilled at solving those types of problems. And then ultimately, if you're in this place where you really want to leverage some of the features we talked about with NX Cloud, that is something that we'd love to talk to you about as well. We can get you on a trial of typically a trial of NX Cloud. You can kind of get to see how it's working and try it out yourself. But I think this is it. So feel free to scan this QR code. Or you can go to that link there, and we'd love to follow up with you after the fact. But ultimately, really thankful to you, Elias, and the rest of the team of Bitovi. This has been super fun thing to be a part of, and glad for everyone that joined from all over the world. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Jordan. Thanks, everyone.